morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this penultimate session of the Indica Books Open House with Otis. The reason I say this is the penultimate one is because we're going to have one today, and the last one is going to be next Sunday, the 31st of October, after which Otis is going to be taking some time off to get some of his writing projects completed, and it'll also give us time to take in all the feedback and the sessions that we have had over the last 1 year. I see that we have done 39 sessions so far from, I believe, last August when we started, which is quite I think it's a great continuity that we have had, and we'll have one more. So we'll end this year with a total of 41 sessions, which is excellent. So for those of you joining in for the first time, this is how it works. So we invite, that is Indica and Indica Books invites people who are interested in improving their writing, getting feedback on their writing, on the craft and art of writing, and who subscribe to an Indic ethos to send in their short writing samples of about 800 to 900 words to Otis in a prescribed format, by which I mean double-spaced, Times New Roman font size 12 in a PDF document to Otis, and he takes it, reviews it, sends back his feedback in a PDF document, and then when we meet on Sunday, he will go over the writing pieces that have been submitted. Obviously, there are lots and lots of them. He'll cover only some of them as he can in the time that we have, which is typically an hour and a half, and you can listen in, you can watch, and you can ask questions, and you can use that and become the next V.S. Naipaul, R.K. Narayan, or whoever your hero is. And I personally, before we get started, I would like to share, Otis, that your sessions have been very useful. And while overall, obviously, I found them useful, a few areas that I would like to point out where I believe I have learned enough to be able to improve my own craft of writing has been point of view. Definitely, that is one thing that I know that I have work to do, but I think it's given me a lot of perspective and insights. So thank you for all your help and your sessions. So with that, I'll turn this over to you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, we have three works today, and I'll share my screen. Sri Charan, are you?
Yeah, hi.
Sri Charan, can I ask you a question? Are you, am I saying your name right? Is the Sri, is that like a prefix of some kind, and then Charan, or can you just explain for me?
It's two names actually. Shri is one part and Charan is one part.
Okay.
So if I may take the liberty, Otis and Sri Charan. So Sri Charan essentially means the feet of the Lord. So Sri is, the Lord, and Charan is feet. So it's literally, the feet of the Lord. And that's why the two words, but it's, so one more, Sri Charan, if you don't mind, would you switch your camera on so we can all...
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I was a little bit curious because I do know that like a lot of, names, they are also coming from words. So Sri is Lord and then Charan is feet?
Yeah.
Was that what you were saying? Okay.
Yes.
And is that typical to have the so Lord, so is it like Lord's feet, or is it, okay, I was just trying to think of like nouns and adjectives, but I think I got it pretty much. Thank you. That's great to know. I love knowing that stuff because I'm fascinated with language for one, so I like to learn a little bit too. Well, let's talk about your work, Abhinav. I think maybe I need screen sharing from you. Ram said Sri is auspicious.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a good feet, auspicious feet.
I like that. That's beautiful. Okay, let's see if I have the screen sharing. Yes, I do. Okay, so Sri Tran, you have been doing some great work. Is this the same piece that I was reading in the anthology?
Yeah, yeah,
So this is
exactly.
okay. So you are doing some really, really good work.
Thank you.
I want to say that I really see. I think that in a number of ways, I don't know when you first, when we first started meeting, probably with the anthology work. And I don't know what your anthology work looked like. I can't remember all the individual works initially, but I think that now at this point, I see looking back to some degree that you've really worked so hard at some things. I think you've made some really great choices. You know that I was talking so much, Abhinav, you were talking about point of view, but in Sritran's work, um,
Excuse me. I'll turn off my camera for like 2 minutes,
oh,
if
okay,
it's no problem. Okay.
okay, um, in Sritran's work, um, I'm going to guess a little bit that because he put this point of view in his head, he said, "Well, I'm going to write in first person," and that's not a bad choice. Abhinav, we were just talking about that because you said you did that with your piece too. First person is a good way to practice writing in point of view, right? Because when we're writing in, well, except for the one tricky thing that we have this problem of having first person and first person narrator. So we do have 2 points of view in first person. Actually, we have 2 points of view in third person also, but first person can focus our point of view because we're used to imagining a point of view from ourselves. Does that make any sense? Like
Yeah,
people often get very worked up about like first person, third person, sometimes second person, which I find is a kind of boutique point of view. First person plural, which is we, which I also find kind of boutique, and I don't advise boutique, but actually they're really the same. You have a character who has a point of view, and then you have a narrator who has a point of view. In first person, you have a character named I that has a point of view, and you have a narrator named I that has a point of view, and that can be very confusing. And one of the best things for us to do as writers is practice writing in first person point of view and understand when we're writing the character and when we're writing the narrator. Sri, that might be a little something for you still to work on in this piece,
yeah,
but I see you're on the right track. I mean, you forced yourself in first person and you've been working on it consistently. In third person, it's the same thing. We can write he or she here, and then we still have a narrator who we call limited omniscient. They're not called he or she, but they're called limited omniscient. But from my point of view, the way I see how point of view works is that it's basically the same as the I. They're just sort of called different things.
yeah.
Does that make
So
sense?
initially, the very first draft I wrote in third person, but a
I
problem I
thought so.
faced there is I am messing up some pronouns. So when
Um,
I write it is just getting a bit messed up. That's why I shifted to the first person.
this is this is brilliant, Sri Charan, because I want to say that like one thing we want to do as writers is we want to understand our limitations and we want to work within them. Yes, we want to push the boundaries and we want to learn more, but finally, when it comes down to it, we want to present something that, our published work, we want to work within the parameters that we can handle. So that's a good choice. I absolutely did that. If you don't show someone you don't know how to do something, they don't know that you don't know how to do it. That's my lesson. I've worked that way my entire life. Um, Well, let's read a little bit of this. Um, let's. Gosh, there's so many. Let's. Can you? Let me get a thing here. Okay, if you could read between these two, let's see if I can get them both. I'll have to scroll up as you get closer. Okay. Do you mind reading
Okay.
this first section? I mean, this is not the first section, but this is a little bit later in the piece.
Uh, uh, can you show me the section of the beginning of the section where I had to read?
I was eager right there.
Okay, yeah, sure. I was eager to get out of the doomed lab. As soon as I tucked its door behind me, the sun's touch cleansed me of the alleged irritation of the Vaidya's workspace, but the teeth of cold mountainous winter dug into my skin. I tightened the woolen cloak around my body and hid my face in layers and layers of cloth as I walked down the avenue of the street. The Rajavaidya owns this street called Vaidyavidhi, and he had labs scattered on each side of the roadway for his apprentices and students. The labs were mostly locked, and the street was mostly devoid of people, owing partly to the cold air in the morning and partly to the lack of passion in Vaidya's intellectual hairs to start their work so soon. I must give some credit to the old man for his knowledge and determination, and for maintaining his street neatly despite lack of caring for his own lab. I made sure that no one recognized me in my hiding. There were spies working for greedy merchants and treacherous ministers in my own kingdom, and I did not want them to dig into the details of the king's silent visit to the doctor. The Vaijaviti joined the Rajamarga, the king's highroad, as did the other dozen streets from its both sides. I uncovered my face as soon as I moved a safe distance away from the Vaijaviti and walked for half a crossa towards west, till the end of the road, where the eastern gate to the royal complex welcomed whoever had business concerning the king's matters.
Okay. Okay. I have a lot to say about that, but I also want you to read another section.
Okay.
Um, wait, where is it? Okay. If you could just read this section too here.
Okay, sure. While the lower complex hosted crude requirements of the royalty, this side of the river buzzed with the excitement of the sporting arena, fragrance of 1,000 flowers in the garden, majesty of the court, the resident apartments, and palaces of stone, lime, and marble. Standing on the crest of the hill was the crown of Madra itself, the courtroom's lime dome that overlooked the whole city from its position. A small canal surrounded the courtroom, circling the lake at a okay, circling the lake at a slightly lower altitude was an integrated circular residence of the royal family. It was indeed a grand design to make the entire complex look like a blooming flower. The ancient one who envisioned this could have been a pattern of art and beauty, but a poor practical thinker. The winter winds were certainly not benevolent at this height, and Madraka kings who took pride in their legacy never abandoned the palace.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Um, okay. Shutran, there are some things that you are really doing so well, and I think number one among them is I think that you're having this experience, which is, uh, I don't know. I think it is. I think it for me. It's like the juice. Okay, it's like the thing that I like. That the reason I want to be a writer, and it's when you get into point of view, and when you describe something like this, you get to say a line like this. The ancient one who had envisioned this could have been a patron of the arts and beauty, but a poor practical thinker. Like, okay, I'm just going to guess. But that was not something that you had before you wrote this. That wasn't something, you did not go into writing this with that on your mind. Instead, I'm going to guess, you wrote this. And from that, you were able to leap up to this. You know how like they talk about boats? Boats go into water like this and they're slogging through and then they plane. That's like this is the instance of a writer doing that. The writer is writing the details, and then they plane. And
Yes,
they're going
indeed.
over the top of it. Does that describe
Yes,
a little bit what
exactly.
happened?
It came exactly when I reached that section. I did not have that in mind before.
There's some other sections like that in this piece. So you do it several times. You do it several times where you get so intently into the point of view that you're able to plane on the top of it. You basically come into it, you're describing it, and it reveals something to you. This is why we write. This is the reason. We do not write. Okay, so I'm feeling like teary and moved basically
Oh,
because of the writing process. But it's like, we don't write to write what we know. We write to know what we don't know. We write to discover something new. That's why we write. If we were writing just to write what we know, who the heck are we? We don't know anything. I mean, come on. How many billions of people on the planet? I know something more than someone else does? No, I don't. I don't. But I engage in this process. And finally, whether other people read it or not, right? Great if they do, but that's not my point. It is not my point. My point is this, to go into that point of view and discover something. I love it. And again, here in this section, we talked about, I want to just say again that I see that you're really taking things in. You're saying, okay, he said this, and you're working to do it. You're experimenting with it is the way I like to think of it. You might not want to do it, but what the heck, try to do it. So you're putting in that effort, and for me, it's paying off. We talked about the fact that this world is not, when all of the writers of the anthologies are writing about the ancient world of Mahabharata, what's left out are all the details, of course, because it was such an effort, it seems to me, such an effort to recall all the facts and the circumstances and the actions of the time period. The material world was not as important to remember because the material world was already representing itself. You didn't need a storyteller to tell you about the material world that was all around you, right? But now, when we're looking so far back, we're not able to visualize it. So we do need that storyteller to tell us about the material world. And here you have your character as a narrator basically here, because he's not walking through, but he's also seeing it. So it's a little bit merged, basically telling us about all of this. And I think you told me a little bit about this. This was indeed grand design to make the entire complex look like a blooming flower. It's amazing. I mean, that is, and I imagine you did research in order to get these details. I don't know, but I still believe it. Whether you did or not, hopefully you did. What you don't want is you don't want someone who has done research to bust you for it. But
yeah, actually, this is fiction kind of, because whenever I read Mahabharata, I did not get any descriptions of the palaces, or at least in this case, my character, because he's very less explored. Even when he was explored, the most of his appearance is in the battle scene. So I had to conjure it.
Well, you had to conjure it, and you conjured it very well. So that's the only test. Okay, so let me say a couple things about improving this piece. Okay,
yeah, sure.
This is excellent work. I love this world. I'm going to say for everyone. This is so. A couple, my criticisms are going to be, and I feel you're just starting. You're starting out the piece. It's very often the case when we write that we start off a little bit slow. It's like as we're trying, and here you're like working with this alliteration. It's too thick, for me. The damp and dark, the darker and dreams, the damper and the doom. It has, so this is something we want to be careful of for all of us. Alliteration, right, is a repetition of the consonants, and there's a repetition of vowels called assonants, and these are poetic terms. It's everything we do in writing, in a sense, is a kind of artifice, but it's a little bit of artifice that draws attention to itself. I think we don't want to do that. So I think the best form of writing we can do is to write as if we're writing a clear pane of glass through which the reader sees the world. We do not see the writing. We see the world beyond the writing. Right? So I think, my advice generally is for us to be careful about artifice.
Okay.
But it totally makes sense as you're sort of warming up. I always see the first paragraph is like a warm-up paragraph. Then I liked I liked all of this. I felt like I was there. But what I would suggest for this piece is that you have the king walking down the street. He's walking down the street after he's been to the, um, apothecary, or the pharmacist, the seer, or
Yeah, doctor.
he's a person who works with the plants. Yeah. So you're basically writing this description of the place as he's leaving it. But so much, I mean, why not just put that above? So we see the king, right, going there, hiding, basically showing up, avoiding the spies and all of that. I also want to underscore, uh, this is for everyone else. You haven't read this piece before, but in the original versions, you had him talking about the fact that he was having nightmares. I'm pretty sure. Now you're
Yeah,
showing us, and now you're dramatizing it, right? I I hope everyone here might appreciate that. This is showing the difficulty of the nightmares rather than telling about the difficulty of the nightmares. We can say, "Oh, I've been having such a hard time having nightmares for a month," right? But this is a king who's been having nightmares for a month, who is going into this other part of town. He's cloaking himself, he's hiding himself, and he's going to the apothecary in order to get relief from it. And no one must know, because if anyone knows, it will diminish his power. It can I'm only seeing a bunch of blank screens, but I want you just to take a moment to understand what that means. That is dramatizing the difficulty. That is showing, that's not just saying that there's a problem, that's showing what the king is willing to do to solve the problem, which shows us how big a problem it is. Sharon, am I right?
yeah, yeah. Initially, I had this nightmares as you suggested, and we had discussion about how one should not start with a dream sequence, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. So that was it. Well, whatever it is, you've come up with a good solution, and this is the next thing, probably aside from that planing thing, which is, obviously I love, but the other thing that we want to do as writers is we want to think like dramatists. We want to figure out, how do we show something rather than just tell something. That is a big issue for all of us. We're coming up with scenes that demonstrate issues. So this is a scene that absolutely demonstrates the difficulty this king is having with these nightmares. And it is the precursor to your story.
yes,
Absolutely. So anyway, my comment here is to take this great vision of, like, so the king, we're gonna get to the palace when he comes back. So that description of the palace is here. Right now in this piece, you have the description of this sort of the area of the doctor, apothecary is here, and then the description of the palace here, which is true. He comes out this way and goes back this way. But if we think about it sort of visually, right, space-wise, he actually leaves that palace that's familiar. And I would start with him just transitioning into this other place. Then when he walks into the apothecary's office, then he sees how it's neat and orderly. Then he sees how crazy this place is, right? So now we're getting those contrasts. Then he leaves, he can put his stuff back on and hide, and he's going to go back through it. We don't need to hear it again. We can go through it quickly. Now we're going to go into the palace, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're
uh,
going to, hear
yeah.
about the
Okay,
messenger. But it's just a small way to sort of organize that, so that you basically prepare us. You take us on this transition for him to go to the apothecary. Um,
yeah. Okay. So why I chose this putting this after this the Vaidya's work lab is I remember we had one discussion about subjectivity and objectivity. So
mhm.
I thought if I put this first, then it will appear more subjective, as in we just linger in the thoughts of Shalia instead of having some action there.
Well,
So
these are right. I see that, but Well, once you get into, I tightened the woolen cloak around my body and hid my face in layers and layers of clothes. Okay, so in a sense, that's the narrator, but it's the narrator very focused on the actions of the character. I might start there.
Okay.
You know, and so, and then we basically, so we get from this point, and we're going to. So even this, I love this sentence here early before we meet him. I must give some credit to the old man. He's such a great character, right? And we haven't met him yet. The knowledge and determination for maintaining his streets so neatly. So now, so that's that in a sense, you have to work it out obviously in the details, but basically that can move up to the front. Now, so we have this line. Let me go to a different thing. So despite the lack of caring for his own lab, that we will see, you don't have to write that line. Now that we basically set up the streets are so neat and orderly, and then he goes into the lab, which is chaotic.
Yeah.
And then, and we might have a more and deeper description of that lab. And I love the concoction that he makes for the king, and the directions about burning it and smelling it. All of that is just great. Although I think that the sense that there are spies could be here, right? So like, I do this mostly in my mind, but it is possible to do it just by writing it. So I might have some mention of spies, because I think that that's a very, it's a great thing to bring up, because, you know, in the writing of the Mahabharata, it's as if, you know, we just hear about these kings, and, you know, we hear about these nobilities and all of that, and we don't realize that there are a whole bunch of people vying for power underneath the pyramid. You know, they're at the top of the pyramid, but there are all these people down here too, and they're doing stuff. The king does not have ultimate power. He can't control everything, and he doesn't, right? So there are other people, there's powerful merchants, there's all sorts of people involved in trying to get what they want too. And so I think that idea of spies as a diminishment to the king's power, and also putting a stake on the decisions he makes. If people find out, it's bad. He seems less powerful. It reminds me of The Sopranos. If you watch The Sopranos, it's sort of like, this is like The Sopranos, right? I mean, he's Tony Soprano, and he's going to the psychiatrist. He's got to hide, right? I think it's great. It works. So anyway, what I was saying is the spies might come up in the beginning, and they might also come up at the end, and maybe in a slightly more acute way, right? So, because we always want to be escalating. So if the spies come up here, now maybe he actually sees somebody, you know, who has connections to so-and-so, and then he skirts down it. Maybe he has to take a different road, and that shows us really that these spies do have power. Anyway, fantastic work.
Thank you, Otis. I have a question.
Don't let it go to your head though, because I've seen that happen. Okay, I have a story for you. So I was at Stanford at this thing called a Stegner. I had a Stegner fellowship, which meant that, you know, I submitted them a piece of work, and they accepted me over a whole bunch of other people, and they gave me money, thousands and thousands of dollars, to go to Stanford. I didn't have to pay anything. It was amazing. Okay, so this is a story about someone else who went to Stanford. This person went to Stanford at the same time as one of my teachers, Tobias Wolff, a very well-known writer. And I actually met him. His name was Steve. Steve was the youngest person ever to come into Stanford, and he'd already submitted 2 stories to the New Yorker, which is a very famous magazine for short stories in the United States. And he'd come into the Stanford writing program. 2 stories in the New Yorker already, and he went to Stanford. Do you know how many more stories he published?
Oh.
None. So that's just to emphasize, don't let it go to your head.
Yeah, sure.
What happened to him? I mean, I think you mentioned this earlier, Otis, but I can't for the life of me understand what happened.
Sometimes when you get a lot of success, you feel you have so much to live up to that you can't do it.
That's sad. That's sad.
It is sad. It is sad. But I think it's human, and I think it's something just to keep in mind. That's why we like to, as writers, I think we like to not think about the past and really not think about the future. It's not, I'll go back to it actually isn't about what's happened. Who cares? And it's not about what's going to happen. Oh, do I get published? I get a book or something like that? That doesn't matter either. The reason I write is so that I can get into these point of views and then see something new. That's why I write. I write to discover. That is the juice. Yes, I am an addict. I'm an addict. I confess. But that's why I do it. Yeah. Sri Charan?
Yeah, I have a question here.
Yeah.
We had, I mean, the most of this part goes into the surroundings, right? How describing the surroundings and all. So we are not yet moving into the main story, right? So,
Right.
I mean, is it worth it? I mean, this longer description taking the space for not going immediately into the story.
Well, this is a long piece. It's very atmospheric, so it really draws us into the world and the complexity of the world, and I believe it.
Okay.
So it allows you to do a lot. It allows you to get the king on the move. So remember, before the king was absolutely static before, and he didn't seem to be in any place. Now he seems to be in an entire world. He's in this mountain kingdom. I see it. You've given it to me. You've given me not only the throne room or whatever. You've given me all these other things. You've given me him as a person. So I think you are getting a lot out of it. I agree that you're going to want to just rearrange it so that it's nice and tight so I can get through it, because it is, right now you're writing to discover it, but now you just fix it up and make sure it just happens. It's serving the purpose of setting up the king before he's told that the messenger has arrived. You're basically setting up the point before he sees the chariots, right?
Yes, yes.
And you're handling the difficulty that he's been having dreams, that he has anxiety, that he's been feeling that something bad is coming, right? I think that that's a pretty important. It's basically so John Barth, the writer, says that we want to start our stories with an unstable ground situation. An unstable ground situation. This is good for everybody. So what is cannot sustain, right? It cannot stay. And this is that. This is setting up the unstable ground situation into which the messenger arrives. I think it's good.
Okay.
It's actually even very classic. It's like the in a detective show you say, "In walks the dame," right? If you've seen have you seen Chinatown with Jack
No,
Nicholson?
no.
Okay, I don't know what you're spending your time doing, but you have to see that movie. Anyway,
Okay.
that's a joke. That's a joke. You don't have to see the movie, but it's a classic storytelling, and basically you have a setup with Jake Gittes, and then in walks the dame. Basically, in walks the dame is what you have with this chariot. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It totally works.
Yeah, okay, sure. Thank you. Thanks for the kind comments again.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you're doing great work. Oh, Sri Charan, I'm going to give you this though. I'm going to tell you something else. So now that I
Yeah,
built
yeah,
you
sure,
up,
please.
now that I built you up, I'm going to take you down a peg just so you remain. So, Sri Charan, this is something that I've said to a lot of students over time. So and this goes, I'm not really a grammarian because that's not the big issue. The big issue is storytelling. It doesn't, you can write perfect sentences and never write a story. So being a storyteller is this other ability to imagine point of view, dramatize, all these other things that are much higher level. But grammar, if I do mark something in grammar and you don't do something to specifically address that very problem, if you don't do something actually tangibly to look up, find out what the rule is, look at it, apply it, burn it into your mind and say, I will never do this again. If you don't do that, then you still have that problem.
Yeah, sure. Aditya
So,
has sent us a rule book. I found the problem what it is. Yeah, I knew this comma
okay.
should go
So
into
now
apostrophe.
never, ever,
Yeah.
yeah, never, ever make it again. Not a big deal, but this is, I just told this story to my poor daughter about, because we had to get her a new phone because she'd locked herself out of her old phone. She locked herself out of her own phone because she couldn't remember her passcode. She made a new passcode and then she couldn't remember it. And what did she do with the new phone? She made a passcode and then couldn't remember it. And I was like, if you don't do something to address the problem, you still have the problem.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing this out, really.
I'm going to share a couple of books, Srishar and everyone, on some of these mechanics and rules of writing that I found very useful. So, this exact same problem, for the life of me, I could never quite understand the exact rules of punctuation and all. I'll say that book definitely helped. So I'm going to share those links on chat for the benefit of anyone who's interested.
Yeah, please, thank you.
The big kahuna in terms of those books is the Chicago Manual of Style. So that is an ultimate reference book. It's not cheap, or hopefully you can find it used. It's the standard basically for most published work, and it handles all kinds of published work, and it's basically probably more than you need. Better to go to the library and use it than to buy one, because you only need it for specific things. You're like, okay, comma use, you look at comma use and you're going to get more than you want, basically. But the other book definitely to buy and read is Strunk and White Elements of Style. Strunk and White Elements of Style is a great book. It's short and it's even funny. Vandana, should we talk about your piece? Are you? Oh, okay. Vandana, you either listen on the computer or the phone. Otherwise, we're going to get a feedback. Vandana, you have to not have the phone and the computer going at the same time. Can you hear me? Abhinav, where have you gone? Vandana, I think now you're going to have to please mute yourself. Mute. Abhinav, I'm not able to mute because I do not have that control. Vandana, you have to turn off the phone, please. Thank you, Vandana. Thank you. Vandana, so with the computer and the Zoom, I don't know if you had your computer on and your phone on at the same time, or just the phone near the computer can sometimes cause an echo to occur. I don't know why, but so that means when I was speaking, then sound was coming back to me, and basically sounds like some of the worst time. It reminds me of some of the worst times in my life when that seemed to happen regularly. Vandana, are you able to, do you have a microphone, and uh, are you able to speak without having it on the phone?
Yes, I'm able to speak.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Vandana? Okay, now Vandana, we need you to be just on one device probably, and I'm just wondering if you can speak.
Hello.
Yes, great. Welcome. Okay, so you have to have just one device on.
You know what? I'm. Wow. Okay.
Okay, Abhinav?
Okay. Is this better now?
No, you have to
I
mute.
still have an echo.
If you can mute Vandana again, actually.
Okay. Done.
Okay, Vandana, sorry. So if we have two devices on, or if they're close to each other, like your phone and your computer, we'll get an echo. And then I don't know if you hear it, but I hear it. So then basically I speak, and then my voice comes back at me, and it makes me feel crazy, basically. So
even I was getting the echo, so that can be very, very frustrating.
Yeah, if Abhinav is getting it, then it's frustrating. I would like to point that out. I don't get that, Abhinav. I think we're almost becoming, over the time, we're becoming more like a comedy team. Okay. The Vandana, thank you for submitting something. I think maybe it's your first work that you've submitted that I've seen. So you can just, okay, great. Now mute again.
I don't think I hear an echo. Oh no, I do.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, so Vandana, just if you want to answer something, just unmute and then answer and then mute again, because we're getting an echo from your devices. Okay. So well, thank you so much for submitting it. Let's talk about it a little bit. So there's some things here. Abhinav has already mentioned. Oh, let's have you read a little bit. So this, and with some things that are just yes, for now you don't have to mute and unmute. You could just go yes. So I'll understand that I'm correct, because I'm going to make a couple assumptions in here. But let's well, I wanted you to. Vandana, I'm not sure how it will go. I think probably while you read this, I'm going to mute myself. But if you could read between these, do you see the green lines? Read between those two lines. I'm going to mute so then we won't get an echo, and you'll just read that section. And then mute yourself again, and then we'll talk about the piece, okay? Let's try it. Okay. I'm going to mute and go for it.
That fateful day, Arif had almost done his part. His cell phone rang. The call was from the hospital. It was past midnight. His bones were aching, and a mild headache gripped him. He called his colleagues. They were in another part of the city. Finally, Uttam called. Arif asked him to meet at the hospital. On reaching the hospital, Uttam met him as planned. He was assigned to report a COVID patient body to a nearby village. Arif knew they would reach the village by midnight. By dawn, he asked Uttam to drive while he took a nap. Uttam offered to drop him at the office. Arif declined. Once in village, the relatives refused to accept the body. This was a complicated situation. The hospital would not take the body, and the relatives had outright refused. The driver faced a novel situation. What followed was revolutionary. These ambulance drivers performed the last rites. Arif Khan, a middle-aged Muslim ambulance driver, along with his colleagues, would do or arrange the last rites of COVID patients. The word grew like wildfire. Now the NGO was approached for the service too. Months later, Arif was diagnosed with COVID. He succumbed to the disease. He was honored as a frontline warrior by the President of India, a rare honor in this challenging time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so mute again. Abhinav, if you're there, you can jump in mute.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think now that maybe this is so one of the things we like to figure out a couple things with work early on. So one is, do we want to write a narrative, or do we want to write a thesis-driven work? The next thing, if we're writing a narrative only, we want to know if we're writing nonfiction or we're writing fiction. So nonfiction narrative is like memoir, and if you're writing about someone else. I think that this is nonfiction. So do you want to give me a thumbs up if it is nonfiction? Is this an actual person? Or is it fiction? Vandana? Do you have a sense, is this about an actual person, for example, that might have been in the newspaper? Yes?
She said it's nonfiction.
It's nonfiction. Yeah, so that's what I thought. Okay, thanks. I'm not sure what them. Yeah, so that's what I think too. So I think that this is an incredible story. I think that you've obviously, picked out an incredible story, and there are going to be a few things that I'm going to talk about that I talk about endlessly, as everyone that comes to this knows, about point of view and whose story it is, and getting into their point of view and writing that consistently, that I'll say about this piece. But I do want to start with saying that it is an incredible piece. The heart of this story, it seems to me right now, is, and the thing that it seems that you might want to focus on right now, you're covering the entire story. And with what I would say without much form, it kind of, in time it goes here, it goes there, it's general, and it doesn't have a point of view that's driving us all the way through. But at the end here, I feel like we focus in on something that you could also focus in on as the story. If it were me writing the story, I would concentrate on, I wouldn't write A Fateful Day. I would start with Arif, right? His cell phone rang. The call was from the hospital. It was past midnight. His bones were aching. All of this is very good. He called his colleagues. They were another. So all of this were right in the story. They were in another part of the city. Finally, Atam called. Arif asked him to meet at the hospital. On reaching the hospital. So at this point, we're right in time and in the story. I would start here. You might, sorry, I can't really write with my mouse very well. So you might decide that you want to build this out a little bit or take it down a little bit. You want to construct the scene. We might want to see what his house is like. Seeing his house might be a way to tell us that he's Muslim. So if we see any, artifacts or indications that he's Muslim from his house, then that would help us. And then take us to driving in the ambulance, all of this scene, and this is the driving section. So this would be a section to have. We basically have a home section, a hospital section, the driving section, right? And then we arrive at the village. So we want to be able to see the village, right? And then we want this scene. Okay? The relatives refuse to accept the body. What an incredible scene that is. So as writers, for all of us, we're always looking for great things to write about. Either we want to look at them in the world, or we want to try and make them up for ourselves. There's always going to be a connection between what we imagine even and the world, since we don't imagine things that are really outside the world. They always have some kind of relevance to our world. But this scene here, when the relatives refuse to accept the body, the ambulance drivers have taken the body to the relatives, and the relatives say no. That creates the big problem here. So as you say, this was a complicated situation. You won't have to write that once we go through the entire thing. Then they go to the hospital. The hospital would not take the body. I don't know which comes first. So you have to see the hospital, either the hospital refuses to take the body, right? And then they go to the relatives and the relatives refuse. You have to figure that out either, right? Because it happens in sequence. The key to understanding how we write narrative is that narrative is a sequence of events. 1, 2, 3, 4. So a narrative is a sequence of events. Thesis-driven work starts with an argument and then supports the argument. So it's actually backwards, right? But a narrative starts at the beginning and goes to the end. So you just want to start at the beginning with this story. Arif in his home, Arif getting a call, Arif calling his colleagues, right? You want to just go in sequence through all of these events, and then you basically are moving through time and arriving at the pinnacle, the most difficult moment. And the most difficult moment is when these ambulance drivers have taken this body to the hospital first and been refused. And they're like, well, what can we do with the body? Let's go find the relatives. So now they have to find the relatives and take the body to the relatives. They're basically stuck with a body in their truck. The relatives also refuse. So then Arif and his fellow driver decide to perform these last rites, right? So this is the climax of the story, it seems to me. Right here. What happens with the story growing like wildfire? For me, I think that that's already been covered in the newspapers. Okay, so I don't think that that's where you as a writer have something more to add, since that's something that the newspapers have already covered. I would suggest not writing that section. I would try and make a narrative story that rises to the pinnacle of basically Arif and his fellow driver making the decision to perform the last rites. I would write in some detail about those rites and how to perform them. Where did they go? What did they do? Etc. I would write that. And then, as a mentor of mine said, begin in action, end with imagery. I think that moment of the two hospital drivers standing there performing the last rites, if there's smoke rising into the air, whatever it looks like, that would be a fabulous ending for this narrative story. I think it's an incredible story that you've picked out. The person, so another thing we always ask ourselves with narrative, and Ram, I think, asked this, was mentioning this at the beginning of this session, or maybe it was in an email, but whose story is it? And it seems to me that it must be Arif's story, right? And this is also why the newspapers covered it, right? Because he's Muslim, and yet he's performing these last rites in the Hindu tradition. So getting to the moment where he makes that decision to do this, that's the That's the climax of this story. And then performing the last rites is, a beautiful and I think poignant denouement, which is the dropping off point of the story. I'll mute myself and see if that makes a little sense to you, Vandana.
What if I want to keep it in the, what if I want to start, like, what should I do with the body? And I want to keep it within this word limit, the 700 word limit.
I come back on. Okay, so if you, thank you. Well, that's up to you. But what I'm saying is, rather than, so right now you're using all these words. So this is what shall we do? So here, what shall we do with the body, right? So this is actually the thing that happens at the end of this story. You brought it up to the beginning. I don't know. I would just try and start at the beginning. My advice is always, start at the beginning and go to the ending. So you want to start the beginning. Where does it start? Start there and then move through. Just create a simple narrative that works in a straight line without bringing other things in. And the other thing would be to organize it with the point of view of the character who undergoes the change, basically. So you want to focus our attention through the point of view of the character, and so not even deal mainly, but deal with him throughout the entire piece. I think that you can write this piece in 750 words. I'm just trying to have you, rather than have this, which I really didn't understand where we were headed, I would just get right into the story that you want to tell on that day. He gets the call, they go in the ambulance, they pick up the body, they go to the hospital, it's refused, they go to the relatives, it's refused. Just go in a nice direct line. That might even make it, it won't make it shorter, but it'll make it more focused. So that's basically all of these things are a long way of saying, just create a greater focus, greater continuity, write it chronologically. And I think that this piece will be great because it's a great story. I'll mute if you have another comment.
Okay, I'll try the other way. So should I do it the narrative way or some other way?
I'll come back on. So if you mute again. Okay, thank you. I think so when we are writing a piece, so this piece is already known, it's already been covered in the newspapers. So we as writers have to think to ourselves, what are we adding to it? Right? What are we adding? It's already in the newspapers. So people already know the basis of this story, or if they want to, they can look at a newspaper. So what we add basically is something that's more imaginatively evocative. Arif has died, so you're not going to be able to interview him to get greater insights into what's happened. So what you really want to do is create a more evocative experience so that so when we read the newspaper, the reader reads about something. But when we read a narrative that's well done and focused, the reader lives through the character. And I think that that's what we add when we write narrative. And I think that that's a tremendous thing to add. So rather than objectively reading about someone where we have a distance, what we do when we write a narrative within point of view is that we draw the reader into the experience of the character and we have them have the experience. And I think that that is an incredible thing to add. And so if you can get your readers to have the experience as closely as possible, imaginatively, to have the experience of Arif, who is able to put aside maybe his religious beliefs or his prejudices or whatever they are, in order to perform the Hindu last rites for this victim of COVID. I think that would be a tremendous accomplishment. So yes, I would suggest writing it as a narrative, not writing it as a thesis, because a thesis is basically an argument that's cold. I mean, a narrative, not to be too complicated about it, a narrative does have a thesis of a kind, but it's not stated. It does not have a stated thesis. I would not write a thesis. I would keep it as a narrative. Let the reader, as well as you can, have the experience of Arif as he makes these decisions and comes up to this larger decision where he puts his own belief systems aside in order to serve others in the way they need to be served, which is what he does. Oh, Vandana, do you have any questions?
No.
Well, thank you so much for submitting this piece. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed learning this story. It's a really, really great story. You have a great eye for, finding a character who's really worth writing about. So definitely pursue this work. If it were me, I like doing experiential work. I would take a trip to that village to see what it looks like. But that's the kind of research I love to do, so that you can write that village very evocatively. That scene right here with sorry, I go back to the ending. The scene when the relatives refuse the body is going to be a very potent scene. That's the scene that precipitates Arif making his decision. So thank you for submitting it. Ram, shall we talk about your work?
Sure.
All right. Let's see. Let's read from the start to. I'll have to move it a little bit. Let's have Grandma come in.
Okay. Sure. Amma was named Vedi, which meant long, lustrous black hair. She was born into a conservative family in a small town in the 1930s, the fifth of 8 surviving siblings. She was in the 8th standard when she grew up. She stopped going to school from the next day. It was Grandpa's decision. Sister Genevieve, her class teacher, visited Grandpa to convince to enroll her back in the school. A servant ran in, carrying a chair, and placed it across from Grandpa's armchair in the corridor. The corridor opened in from the entrance and ran all around the central, sunken, open courtyard. The floor was polished red oxide. The silence that hung in the air reminded Sister Genevieve of her convent. Grandpa smoothed the wisps of hair on his balding head. He gestured Sister Genevieve to the chair brought in by the servant. The backrest of Grandpa's armchair creaked under the weight of his tall, robust frame as he settled into it. He crossed his legs, ankle resting lightly on the other knee, the frills of his dhoti spreading out like a fan. The very next moment, he uncrossed his legs and shuffled forward, a gesture of respect to the guest. Sister Genevieve waited until Grandpa had settled in his chair before sitting on the one offered to her. It had no armrests. Sister Genevieve was pleased. This was a cultured man. She pushed her gown forward from behind her knees as she sat down so that they wouldn't bunch up. Grandpa averted his gaze. Karpagam, Grandpa called out. Grandma came in with a tumbler of water which she handed to Sister Genevieve and stood next to Grandpa, between him and the teacher. Now Grandpa looked up at the teacher. Grandma stared at her own big toe.
Wow. Okay, great, Ram. So you This is Ram already sent me a little note, so he actually has already identified some of the issues with this, which is something that I think that we as writers we really get to. We give something to the crowd, and we always hope that we hit the lottery, but we're still pretty sure that we got a couple of those numbers wrong, and that's the way we are. It's actually a great place to be. It does mean that we can just work on our own writing without getting that critical feedback. But this is a wonderful piece. The big let me even this. So like I look at this now, and Ram, what I think you're taking from this is right. Grandma stared down at her big toe. Okay, so that might seem a little bit weird to some people, because if she stared down, you would say she stared down at her feet, right? But I think that Ram is taking into this advice that I said, the more detailed we are, the better. Okay, so this might be a case of, does it work or does it not? We might go, oh, I'm not positive. But I think the instinct was good. And when I read this through the first time, I didn't think anything of it, because the details sear themselves into your mind. It worked for me when I read it. It was the right detail. Here I see the genius behind the madness. That was a joke, Ram.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, I need to come down a few pegs. Yeah.
But I think it confirms what I was saying, that it is the right move to drive towards detail if that's it, because that rivets the reader's attention. This the way the grandfather and the sister from I guess a Catholic school at this time, right? So the way the sister and the grandfather maneuver around each other with these sort of cultural mores in this time period is handled extraordinarily well, I would say.
Thank you.
Is that a story? No.
Yes.
But it's handled extraordinarily well, and so I don't have a complaint. I'm just like, where's the story? I want the story, but this is being handled so well. I mean, really, I mean, it's as good as it's amazing. Is the sister? What is she? She's white. She's English. She's
She is.
Is there?
I mean, that's how I imagine her. Yeah.
Right. It might be great to work that in. I mean, I would imagine that has I imagine certainly it has a significance, right? I mean, because it's almost her colonial, right, womanhood, right, that allows her even to have this meeting that he, as the grandfather, has to accept, because he would not have that if she was Indian. I don't think this conversation would not take place.
Sure.
So that's important. But I imagined it, but I was doing the work to imagine it. You don't want me to do the work. You definitely don't want to count on any American writer to realize that there's some kind of colonialism. So.
Right.
This right here. So he crosses ankles resting. Okay, Ram, you don't. Okay, which reads better? He crosses legs, ankle resting on the other knee, or he crossed his legs, ankle resting lightly on the other knee. Which is better?
Resting lightly on the knee. The other is assumed there.
No, it's not, Ram. It's not. It's worse. It's cut. Cut this. Because how does it rest lightly? Is he putting?
Right.
Is he
Yeah.
doing? Is he doing something? Is he lifting it?
Yeah. Right. It's not levitating. It's not
It's
levitating.
he's not levitating it. He's not
Right. Yeah.
engaged. He's
Fair.
not engaging his muscles or anything
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
Gravity is gravity, my friend.
Right. Yeah.
Gravity is not a liar.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's redundant. That's a redundant word. Yeah.
The very next moment, he uncrossed his legs and shuffled forward, a gesture of respect to the guest. That is beautiful. That is just wonderful. Is that something that you've observed and seen?
Yeah.
That wonderful observation. Okay, this is the other thing that writers want to do. Okay, this is the other joy of being a writer, is being a witness to things, not being a judge of things. We are not, I don't think we want to be judges, because if we're judges, then we can't witness. That's a bias. But instead to witness and to see, and that is beautifully, I'm going to say it's beautifully observed. And that is a very high aspiration. We saw, Sri Charan was doing some things that, writers, we just love to do. And this is another thing that we love to do. We love to beautifully observe. And as Keats said, beauty is truth and truth is beauty. So I use beauty in that frame. I love the sister. I was not familiar with this.
In fact, I don't know if it is abbreviated like that, but I know that father is abbreviated FR. So.
Oh yeah, it could easily be. It has an effect. I'm just not used to it. I love that she says Vinny is a bright student, a class topper. It would be, it would be amazing. We really get the grandfather so much in this. We don't really get the sort of the sister Genevieve. We don't get Sister Genevieve. Maybe she's only slightly obtuse, but she's obtuse also. I mean, we don't get her sort of that kind of colonialism.
Okay.
We don't quite get that from her maybe as much as we might. I mean, we get it from her in her very presence there, but that's the only way, kind of. And then the real question is, in this piece, whose story is it?
Yes.
And so I don't think this story for me is not complete at all.
No, it is not.
Sorry,
it is
Rob.
not. It is not.
But you do something that I do suggest.
Okay.
That you identify who I think the story is about. It's about Amma.
Yeah, that's right.
I love this beginning. Amma was named Vinny. I almost don't even understand that Amma was named Vinny, which meant long, lustrous black hair. I love it. She was born into a conservative family. You're not holding back at all. You're getting right into the stuff. And I would name the town if you could.
Yeah.
The real place is so, wonderful, and why lose it? And for me, reading, the names of the towns in India, it just is so evocative because I've not seen the word before, and so it's a great thing to add rather than sort of making it generic, which is small town is generic. Generic doesn't work. This is again, always just reiterating for everyone, a story is the unique and the universal, right? So those two veins have to be running through everything. It's absolutely unique. This place, this time, this girl, right? In this town, all of those specifics named Amma, Vinny, long hair, conservative family, 1930, this town, all of those details are the unique aspect. And then the universal aspect of human struggle to get what we want, to live richly, right? So this is so we just want to make sure we don't confuse these two, right? We don't take the unique and make it universal, which is generic.
Right.
And we don't take the universal and make it so unique that the reader can't empathize with it.
Right.
That's it in a nutshell. I mean, we're done here. We're going to have one more session, the denouement, but basically that was it. We just nailed it. So I do think it's her story.
Yeah, it is her story.
If you're going to continue this story, which I hope you are, we only are getting a little bit here. This is a fabulous scene. This is where we do the dramatic thing where somehow she hears, someone comes into the kitchen and says, the sister is here. She sneaks and she watches. She sees all of this. We keep it in her point of view because you're establishing her. You're establishing her as the character.
Yeah,
and
that's brilliant.
It's not brilliant at all, Ram.
Trust me, it is.
This is like having a nail and saying you got to hit it with a hammer. This is mainly our work. There's nothing brilliant about it. We're just yeoman laborers who do what we have to do. That's why we get characters listening by the window. We get them sneaking around the door. We've seen it 100 times. Everyone loves Ian McEwan. Does he do this stuff? Yes, he does it. Everybody does it. Tolstoy does it. Everybody. So yeah, we just stick with her. We just end up feeling, how are we going to dramatize? Psst, psst, who is it? Maybe be wonderful if it was it seems like they're upper class. It would be wonderful if it was a servant or someone like that, because I think that's one of the faults, one of the faults of colonial literature is that a servant class is disappeared, right? And I don't think you want to recreate the literary sins of the past.
Of course.
I know I don't, and boy do I. There are so many of them that it's very, very difficult. And that's it. And then I want to find out what happens next.
I have a question actually. So towards the end, in the concluding part, you made an observation, and you said that Veni not appearing in the story is actually kind of makes it work.
If this is so Ram, this is you have to walk before you can run kind of thing.
Okay, all right.
So you started off omitting the point of view, and now you're omitting the point of view, and it seems to be almost on purpose. I do not suggest this route. Okay. I suggest the harder route of writing point of view, writing a character who arcs themselves.
Right.
Let's do that first.
Sure.
I know I did it first, and I know I'm still doing it.
No, absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, why reinvent the wheel? This is, I think I've told a story about, it brings it up into almost a meta, right into a meta fiction. It's like she's, Amma is the central character, and she's not even in the scene. So that's kind of a meta idea. That's a conceptual idea.
No, that's not what I intended to do actually. So this is supposed to be, there is more that's supposed to follow where she actually comes to the forefront. Okay. And this was more like the setting. This was the setting.
Good. Okay, good. Because I was gonna have to tell you, my mentor Bill Harrison, who said I would have rather cut off both hands at the wrist than write this paragraph. He also said this very wonderful thing, which was, if you're gonna invite everyone to a cricket match, and they're all in the stadium, and you go to the center of the field and you start juggling, you better be a hell of a juggler.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
no, absolutely. I wasn't trying any such experiments.
No,
I wouldn't.
Good.
Yeah, which is I was surprised when you wrote that. So, yeah. Thanks for that. It's helpful.
I just I just noted it, but I mean, this is intellectual. I mean, I'm
Okay.
intellectualizing. I don't.
Right.
One thing I do not want to do when I read is intellectualize,
Okay.
because,
Uh,
I mean, for me, I'll just say intellectualization is distancing myself from the difficulty of life, and I do that plenty already every single day. That is my life,
right.
right?
Right.
What I want to do is I want to be able to experience the difficulty of life in a safe way. That's where the unique and the universal come in. In my own life, I'm escapist all over the place. I'm intellectualizing, I'm, fleeing, I'm, disassociating, whatever. That's life as I live it. This is life as it's actually lived, and that's a novel experience for me and basically every other reader. So yeah, that's our worthy aspiration. Um, Great. Well, I would love to just see this rewritten all in her point of view. I think it can be done easily enough, and we
Sure.
get her there, and we actually end up seeing her because she might get a beating. I love the line where you say the grandfather does not express anger, basically to colonial white women, like to this woman who's coming in, but it's basically very pointedly that he will to the women in his household. Um, Great. Carry on with
Thank
the
you.
story.
Thank you.
All right. Where are we? We're a little bit early, but those are the three pieces I have this week, and we have another session, our last session of the year next week. So hopefully we'll see a lot of pieces, and we have a little celebration. Abhinav said we've had 40 or something sessions this year. That's incredible. That's great. Abhinav, are you still there? He's busy with other things. He's
He
working on his
said
manuscript.
he's popping out for like 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what's going to happen with his work. Does anyone want to talk about anything else? Ashvani, how are you?
I'm great. I was just going to say, I think Abhinav has started the celebration.
You've already started?
No, Abhinav, that's why he's away.
Abhinav did. He started without us? Boy. Yeah, you're probably right. Ashvani, are we going to see something from you next week, I hope?
Yes, I hope to. And I was going to say, this the scene that we were discussing, now that we have time before Abhinav comes, of the scene about he crossed his legs and, put one ankle lightly on the other knee. My
Yeah.
understanding of, what I could be wrong, but my understanding of what Ram was trying to convey was that it was a body mannerism which was peculiar to him. I mean, it's not easy for an average person to sit with one ankle resting on the other knee. It's a very awkward kind of posture. And so what he was trying to perhaps convey was that it was a habit with him, and therefore he was doing it, very easily. And so when he said lightly, what he meant was it wasn't an effort for him to do it. That's the sense I gathered when I read it.
Well, Ashwani, that seems to contradict what I was saying, and we can't have that.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, we can. Okay, we can dig into it, Ram. But if we're doing that much work to hold on to the word, to hold on to an adverb, I think we could spend time better served elsewhere. No, I like that. I mean, I don't disagree. I just actually tried to cross my leg and I wasn't able to do it easily.
Oh, is it?
I would not say I do not, let's say I do not cross my legs lightly.
Right, I get that.
Right.
But yeah, I was just being so, I was just really being so picky. We can't just be on the adverbs, okay? I mean, I just do it as a joke. It's part of my comedy routine to pick on adverbs. Of course, whenever I see them, I knock them off because they make me think. They make me think in a way that I don't like to think, because an adverb, right, describes a verb. A verb is already an action, which makes it intangible. So now you have a modifier on an intangible. That's difficult. That's a much more difficult thing than to say a blue book, right? That's the problem. It's a problem of the imagination. It's just a little bit more busy. I'm being so nuanced about my reading. It isn't really a reflection on what's being addressed. It's actually that as I read it, I'm sort of like lightly placed his knee. I'm like, I'm lightly placed. I don't know what that means. I'm such a literalist. So it's tiny, but it does go to the root of like what I think is important, how our words affect the reader's mind. And our words affect the reader's mind in the same way that the world itself affects our mind. We are very conscious and cognizant of a tiger, but we have much more difficulty understanding, I was going to say how the tiger runs, but anyway, the intangibility of it running, but we feel it, right? What do you think, Ashvani? What did you think about that? The gesture, though, of him. But so basically, he does this. I love it. He sits like this, and then I think she sits, and he moves forward. I think that that's wonderful. What do you think of that, Ashvani? Did that ring true to you?
Yes, sure. I think the whole scene, as it came across to me, was he, out of sheer habit, takes on a posture which is very convenient for him to sit. He is in the habit of possibly sitting in that and reading his newspaper or whatever. And then he suddenly realizes that because he's wearing a single piece of cloth below his waist, that by doing that, possibly he's exposing his private parts to the lady.
Oh, no, not at all, sir. Not at all. So I wear a dhoti. And in my part of the family, that's exactly how it's said. We cross our legs and the ankle rests on the knee. But you got it right that it was habitual. But I think it was not coming out that clearly. Right? Like when, so Otis, when you said that the blue book, that is very clear. But if I say bluish book, then it is not that clear.
Right.
So it is like sometimes my wife tells me that, why don't you pick that thing from there and put it in this and come here? So I have no clue what she's talking.
Tell me about it. And the real question is, did she tell you lightly?
I told you she's my wife, so nothing is to be taken lightly.
Yeah. Well, it's and Ashvani, I mean, actually, I don't think your point is actually your point about the sort of sense of exposure is not off either. Ram, you might not intend everything that you're displaying. This is the thing about when a writer observes something well, we observe it without bias. We don't want to put ideas on it. You do suggest that he moves forward out of respect. And I like that because that helped me understand it a little bit better. I'm not sure that I need that narrator to come in and explain it to me or not, but I liked it personally there because it helped me understand this world more. But definitely there's all these sexual mores between these two, essentially this very uncomfortable situation in which this man, a patriarch, is meeting with this woman, and he wouldn't normally do that except for she's a colonial representative, basically. So I think that's, I think there is an aspect of that, his comfortableness, in a sense of kind of man-spreading, as they say nowadays, kind of man-spreading and then being like, oh, so I that's a part of it. And we really want to, and ideally, Ashvani, you're not really thinking that necessarily. You're not deducing it all, but I'm certainly feeling the sexualized tension and difficulty of this meeting, and the politeness of it. All of those things are being expressed simultaneously, and that is the complexity of life. And I think it's well done. But Ashvani, you're going to be handing something in. And where's Rashma was here earlier, but anyway, someone's got to tell Rashma also to hand in something. Radula, will you be handing in something next week? Check in with everybody.
I'll ping Rashma on the WhatsApp group to let her know that you're expecting a piece from her.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I will see you all. Wonderful to spend my morning with you, your evening. Have a great week next week.
Thank you, Otis.
Thank you, Otis. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Abhinav. Bye.